Hi, Kylie Dunn here and welcome to my Plan With Me video for October. Just before we get started, I realised I don't really talk too much about the materials that I use all that much. So this is my favourite pen. It is my absolute favourite pen because it is a hard brush and so it lets you do calligraphy quite well. The Staedtler pen I've been using quite a bit to get that really fine line, particularly around watercolours. I find I quite like that. And the Mangaka is a new one that I've just acquired, which is another really nice fine line that puts down a little bit more black than the Staedtler does. I've only just really started playing with that, so I'm not using it all that much, but you will undoubtedly see it a lot more in the coming Bujo draws. So October. As you'll notice, layout's slightly different for this month because I normally have my month dates on the left-hand page, but it's there because there's a great big gap for me to do a pop-up, which I'm doing at the end of the video because it's just easier to do it at the end, so I'm not having to draw over it because it's quite thick. You'll also notice blank page on here. That's because I haven't picked a quote for this month yet because I don't know, my brain's not functioning. I'm not entirely sure. My theme for this month is trees, which you can see on the right hand page, and you of course haven't seen many of them yet because I haven't done a title page and I haven't done a quote, but we'll get to that. Health tracker, this change is really good. I actually really like having that shift to be able to sort of track my B12 and vitamin D intake as well, which has been really quite good to have. So I'm keeping it. We'll see whether I make any future changes to adjust it and add anything else in as well. Now, the motif of trees I wasn't planning on doing for this month. I was going to do something else that was going to be a little bit more complex, but I didn't really get around to planning it. So what normally happens is I have themes that I've sort of determined. They are a little bit malleable, but I've pretty much predetermined what I was going to do for the year, and I've just moved a few things around as I've done it. Normally, a couple of weeks out from the end of the month, I sit down and start thinking about, well, what might that look like? What sort of motifs might I draw? And then I start thinking about layouts and I pencil out some layouts and do those things. And the end of September was just really busy, like the end of August was as well, but you know, I'd sort of pre-planned a little bit more for robots. And I was going to do animals and then decided I don't have enough time for that. So I chose trees instead. And some of it might have been a little bit influenced by this, which is the new watercolor palette that I bought, which is Woodlands. I don't know that it had a massive sort of influence, but I also don't know how my subconscious works sometimes, so potentially it did. This new watercolor palette is lovely. I love my primer Decadent Pies. It's you know, just such a lovely set of colors, so I thought I'd get another one just to add to my options and everything else as I'm going through and doing this. And I really like, there are a couple of the colors in here that I just really like, but they work very well together as well, sort of complementing and mixing and doing that, which you will see as we go through the process here too. So animals I wasn't ready for, so I ended up choosing trees because trees are really quite simple. They're a nice simple motif. You can literally just draw a circle on a stick, and you know, as long as you sort of do it in particular ways, it looks like a tree. So yeah, I just went for something easy because my brain needs a bit of a rest every now and again, and I need to remember to give it to it. So I made life a little simpler by choosing a simple motif. And it's also a great motif, like, because there's a lot of color that you can put into this. There are, you know, trees just have all sorts of different colors and presentation, and you can do pretty much anything. And, you know, there's a tree that sort of looks like that. So yeah, I'm not overly fussed about creating things that actually look real in relation to all of this. These are motifs. This is, you know, not, this is the tree that I want to draw. So yeah, so this is what I've done. Now, October, wow, yeah, we're really getting to the end of the year now. It's one of those times that, you know, because I'm starting to really plan out December and even start thinking about what work I'm going to take on in January and what I'm going to do, it starts to become a really reflective time for, so how did 2021 go, and am I happy with where things are? You know, what do I need to focus on for next year, and those sorts of things. And because I do run my own business, then you know that naturally comes into how do I feel about how the business has gone this year, as well as my own sort of development and all of those other things as well. So I'm actually really happy with how the business is going. I've had quite a bit of drawing work, which is great. I've had a bit of explainer video work and those sorts of things. So, you know, it's really good. I'm pretty happy with how things are progressing in those stakes. There are a heap of other things that I had wanted to progress further, but I got too busy to sort of do them, which is not a bad thing, but is something that I need to address for next year. I need to start getting back my creative days a little bit more. We'll see how that goes. And then, of course, there's doing this, and I've really enjoyed doing my bullet journal and recording it and sharing it and doing all of this year. I probably will continue to do it for next year. I haven't necessarily decided. I haven't put a lot of thought into it at this point in time, but you know, it is an interesting thing to think about, the amount of time that it takes to do this and put the video together and do a voiceover and do all of those bits and pieces. You know, which I probably don't have to do in some respects. So I need to think about, you know, whether I change the format of this and how I make it work. But this has been a really good year to sort of, you know, trial this whole process and see how I feel about it, see how I feel about sharing it. I think the sharing is important because I think it makes me be a little bit more focused and creative and, you know, create real themes around things and do that, which I don't know that I do it that much for myself as I do knowing that I'm sharing it. If that makes any sense to everybody else, I'm sure it does. So yeah, it's just one of those things that I need to think about what this looks like as I move forward. This is, of course, a little bit more of a landscape than just the trees. And of course, this is nothing like a landscape that we would have in Australia. But I don't need to stick to my own country. And I really just wanted to, I don't know, I wanted to play around with drawing pine trees and doing that sort of thing, which, like, don't get me wrong, we have them here, but not this sort of, I guess, landscape, the mountainous type landscape like this. But yeah, I wanted to play around with drawing them a little bit, and I thought, you know, they're quite simple in some respects, but have a level of complexity to them as well. And then I thought about just doing something a little bit cute, and I think this is a little bit cute, so this is what I did. Now, I hope that you are creating in whatever way that you create, whether you're doing your own bullet journaling or you have some other creative outlet that you use to go through and relax your mind or allow you to have some outlet or anything else. It's a very important thing to have in your world. So yeah, I'd love to know what sort of things you do actually do to create. You know, feel free to share them in the comments. Feel free to find me on any of the other social medias. The links to my Instagram and Facebook and that are in the comment area, or in the description, I should say. But yeah, everywhere I'm Dinky Loon, because Dinky Loon is an anagram of Kylie Dunn. So there you go. Now, spot the obvious error here. Because the other page was so wet, I turned the camera off to go and make myself a cup of tea, let it all dry properly, and I forgot to turn the camera back on. This is the first time I've done it. I'm actually pretty impressed that we got to month 10 before I forgot to record something. So yeah, there you go. So yeah, you didn't get to see me putting down just layers of watercolour, which is largely what this is. Was just like, you know, spotty layers to try and create a bit of texture in the trees, you know, with a bit more shadow and those sorts of things. I'm quite happy with how these ones came out. So I'm really happy with the simple ones, but actually going through and sort of trying to create a little bit more complexity with the shading and everything else, I'm pretty happy with. So it's one of those things that I don't work too hard on realism. I do like to just sort of illustrate quite simply and do those sorts of things. But occasionally I sort of put a bit of effort into trying to make something look a little bit more realistic. And sometimes it comes off. And, you know, I'm pretty happy with how some of these clusters actually came together, which was nice as well. But yeah, October, reflective time. It's definitely a time to sort of sit there and think about, you know, start planning for next year and how that works, which is what the right-hand page of this layout is actually about. So for those of you who don't know, so for those of you who only know me through finding these on YouTube, 10 years ago I started this weird little self-development project for myself called My Year of TED. And I basically took TED Talks, turned them into 30-day activities and just experimented with my life for a year. 1st of November is literally 10 years since I started that year. And so for the next year, I'm actually just going to be revisiting it. And no, that doesn't mean I'm going to be doing it again. It means I'm going to be looking at the lessons that I got from that and going back and looking at what is stuck, what else I've learnt from particular things out of there, and do a bit more reflection, do a bit more illustration and those sorts of things around it now that I do more of that sort of thing. So yeah, I'm just going to go back and revisit all the pain that I put myself through for a year, which will be interesting, and you will undoubtedly see a little bit of it come through in some of these videos as well. So this is my pop-up layout. As you just saw me try to take the cover off a piece of tape that wasn't even on the bottom of these yet. So yeah, this is done in a pretty thick sort of watercolor, the trees. So it is going to create a bit of thickness, but that's fine. And it's just a really simple pop-up. And of course I drew the trees too tall again, which is a little bit like what I did for my circus pop-up, if you've seen that, which means I've had to set a little bit further down the page. So I couldn't quite do what I wanted with the other two trees that I've just set off to the left-hand side there for a minute. I sort of was going to have them pop up off the front, but there's not real space for that. So instead, they're just being stuck down because why not? Now, this is another bit where when I rush ahead and don't sort of plan too much, I stuck these on before I had finalised my decision about whether I was going to paint the backgrounds or not. And once I saw them on there, I'm like, oh no, I really do need to paint the background, which then means I have to try to do this in a really complicated way. It would have been so much easier if they had just been flat. I don't know why we make our lives difficult at times, but you know, this is just what happens. So the front one's not too difficult. I mean, it was a little bit tedious, but then I've got to do the back one and work around the pop-up in front of it, like seriously. But anyway, so yeah, so this is basically a nice simple layout that I've done for the month. So like I said, a little bit quicker than some of the other bits, but I mean, that could just be because I didn't do a quote. So I feel like it's been naturally a little bit quicker, but who knows? So October is trees. I will sort a quote at some point, I'm sure. Please feel free to reach out and let me know what you're doing for your creative outlets. I'd love to see what some of them are. And this is my bullet journal layout for October. So thank you very much for spending time with me. When I do a quote, I'll share it later. And I appreciate you taking the time and watching this. And please like it, share it, subscribe, all those bits and pieces if you would like to. Thank you. Bye.